You know what's interesting? For a long time, I thought self discovery meant working through my mental health struggles. I thought it meant healing, reading the books, listening to the podcast, journaling, reflecting, doing all the things you're supposed to do when you're trying to grow. And you know what? Don't get me wrong. Those things help a lot. But somewhere along the way, I realized I had skipped over something even more important. I spent so much time trying to heal myself that I hadn't actually taken the time to get to know myself. And as strange as that sounds, those aren't necessarily the same thing. And that's what eventually led me to this idea of self intimacy. You can't build a strong relationship with someone you don't really know, and that includes yourself. And once I realized that, I started asking myself a different question. How do you actually get to know yourself? Like, really? Not in theory, not through another personality quiz, not through another self help book, but in real life. That's what I've been learning lately. And by the end of this video, you'll have 3 simple ways to start building self intimacy for yourself. And the best part, each one of these takes less than 5 minutes because this isn't about adding another complicated routine to your day. It's about creating small moments of connection with yourself, often enough that they start becoming second nature. And before we dive in, if conversations like this help you feel a little more connected to yourself, consider subscribing. That's really what this community is all about: learning, growing, questioning old patterns, and figuring ourselves out together. So, once I started asking myself those questions of who I am when no one else is influencing me, I started realizing something kind of uncomfortable. I wasn't as connected to myself as I thought I was. I knew a lot about my anxiety. I knew a lot about my coping mechanisms. I knew a lot about my triggers. I knew a lot about the wounds I was trying to heal, but I didn't know nearly as much about my joy. What energized me? What inspired me? What made me feel most like myself? I had spent years trying to understand what hurt. I hadn't spent the same amount of time understanding what made me come alive. And maybe you've experienced that too. Maybe you've become really skilled at identifying what's wrong, really skilled at managing your stress, really skilled at surviving difficult seasons. But when was the last time you got curious about yourself outside of your struggles? Not your wounds, not your responsibilities, not the things you're trying to fix. You getting curious about yourself. That's when I came across this idea of self intimacy. And the best way I can describe it is this: self intimacy is the relationship you have with yourself. It's knowing yourself beyond your responsibilities, beyond your achievements, beyond your healing journey, beyond what other people think about you. It's knowing how you feel, what you value, what excites you, what drains you, what feels aligned, and what doesn't. And what surprised me most is that self intimacy isn't built through big, life changing moments. It's built through attention. And you know what I noticed? Self intimacy was built through intentional interactions with yourself. Self intimacy isn't about becoming somebody new, it's about becoming familiar with who you are already. And for me, that changed everything. So I want to talk about what I am practicing now. And let me be clear, I'm not sharing this because I've mastered self intimacy. I'm sharing it because I'm practicing it. There are still things that I'm learning about myself. There are still moments where I discover a preference I never gave myself permission to have before, or realize a belief isn't actually mine, or notice that I've been living on autopilot. And you know what? That's okay. We're getting to know ourselves little by little. Who we are today is not who we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And you will not be the same person 10 years from now, and so on. So getting to know ourselves is going to be a constant discovery. But don't let that dishearten you. Let that be permission to stay curious about yourself. Because getting to know yourself isn't something you finish. It's a relationship. Let it continue to evolve because you will continue to evolve. So instead of trying to reinvent myself, I've been trying to get curious about myself. And here's the thing, there are several ways to practice self intimacy. And as I mentioned earlier, it will be a lifelong journey to do this, but you need intentional practice every day to really get to know yourself and get to know who you are until it becomes second nature. The first path is what I like to call the emotional compass. The next time you feel overwhelmed or irritated, anxious, or emotionally charged, pause. Place your hand on your chest and take one slow breath. Then ask yourself, what is the most honest thing I'm feeling right now? The most reasonable thing, not the most productive thing, the most honest thing. And just listen. I've noticed that most of the time, my feelings aren't asking to be fixed. They're asking to be acknowledged. And that simple question helps me hear myself before I start reacting to everyone else. And maybe that's something you need. Just an emotional check-in to be able to readjust and adapt yourself so that you can know where to proceed, where you are guided by your own emotions and what you would like to do next. Not another solution, just a moment to hear yourself. Path 2 is what I like to call, is what most commonly known as grounding, but I'm going to call it the sensory bridge. You're going to pick one sensory experience. So we have our 5 senses, and I actually like to do this in the mornings with a cup of coffee. I like to do this in the mornings with a cup of coffee. Just having the warmth of just holding a cup of coffee and feeling the warmth of it in your hands, or perhaps it's you have a cup of tea if you prefer that. Or maybe it's listening to the shower, feeling the sunlight through the window, the sounds of the birds outside. Then spend 60 seconds fully paying attention to it. Maybe you've had one of those days where you get to the end and you realize you were physically present for all of it, but mentally, you were somewhere else. That's usually my cue that I've become disconnected from myself. This practice helps me return to the present moment. And more often than not, that's where I reconnect with myself. And all it takes is 60 seconds. And as time progresses, you can add on to the time. And the third path is the private draft question. And this is a new one for me too. And I've been really excited to practice this. So ask yourself, if I didn't have to explain this to anyone, what would I want? Then write down whatever comes up in your journal, in your notes app, on a sticky note, anywhere. No editing, no justifying, no defending, just be honest. And this one is probably going to feel surprisingly uncomfortable. Not because you don't have wants, but because many of us have spent years prioritizing what everyone else needs. This question reminds me that my own voice deserves a seat at the table too. And you know what? Sometimes the answer may come immediately. Sometimes it doesn't. But don't judge yourself for that. I know I won't. Because sometimes we just don't have the answers. But every time I ask, I'm re-strengthening that connection because I'm attempting to reconnect with myself. Because the real goal isn't to fully figure yourself out. I don't know if any of us ever really completely do. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself while you're still figuring it out. To stay curious, to stay connected, to keep showing up for yourself even when you don't have all the answers. Because you're going to change. You're going to outgrow things. You're going to surprise yourself. You may like or dislike some of those things. You're going to discover parts of yourself you didn't even know about. And if you're paying attention, you'll get to meet new versions of yourself over and over again. The practice is simply staying in a relationship with yourself through all of it, even when it's messy, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's unclear. So before we end this conversation, I want you to think about something. What do you know about yourself outside of your struggles, outside of your responsibilities, outside of the things you're trying to fix? What brings you joy? What energizes you? What makes you feel yourself? Maybe those answers come easily. Maybe they don't. Either way, that's okay, because Self-intimacy isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to stay curious long enough to discover them. One check-in, one pause, and one honest moment at a time. If this conversation resonated with you, perhaps you're also on this journey of understanding who you are, let me know in the comments. Which of these 3 paths are you going to try first? I would genuinely love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, what you like, your dislikes. And if you know someone who's been spending so much time trying to heal that they've forgotten to get to know themselves, send this video their way. Because the relationship you've been searching for might actually begin with you. And that relationship is worth investing in. Thank you so much, familia, for watching today's episode. Please leave a like, a comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Nos vemos, familia. Adios.